Meniga Metta Bhavana Sayadaw for the Nina Speaking Yankin Parami Bit Kudu Bit for the Ni Nishi Piotavare Any Naniga Sayadaw for the Niguro Pio Chimia Pinya P. Adipinya P. Mandiari T. Tripsandia Uza Baby Chimbi Atuare a chain Kala Soro to Uza Bill Mayababu. Tiro Piggy Yangi Palmi Pit Kudu Pit Dave Polipsipare. Any part of me, good of you, Bob lady, senior lady, Maniga, Tita, Yogavare. Eddie got big and young in part of me, yes, good of you, so there's a Zurema. Part of me, so there's a guy lonely, and a day before Jamadi, a good dear, who Lare Kachama. Tis a lonely, a day better. For tofu, look at there, Dimina never very part of me, a meaning body, a day belly in a pure you.
Yesterday, the Venerable Sayadaw explained that there are two kinds of developing metta bhavana, namely two kinds of mental development of loving kindness. One is in order to gain the absorption jhanas, and the other one is to be free from danger and enmity, and also to thereby to develop one's perfections and to gain merit. Out of these two kinds of development of loving kindness, there is no time to explain the first one, namely practice of metta bhavana in order to gain absorptions. And we cannot, or the Venerable Sayadaw cannot give importance to this first type of metta bhavana, since the emphasis of this retreat is on developing knowledge through the practice of satipatthana. So, therefore, therefore the meditators, or there's only time to develop the second type of metta bhavana, namely to be free from danger and so on. Now, as for the second kind, yesterday the Venerable Sayadaw explained only, at the surface, how to practice this, how to be free from enmity and danger, and on his way just now here to the meditation hall, he thought to himself, well, it's probably, or it would be necessary to explain the meaning or the etymology of the term parami. So kindly allow the Venerable Sayadaw to do so.
Parami sure Luye de Begaro Mimia Dui Appeal, the Rodebele Utara Shivara. Tenia Pileve Mimia do Pokuri, a look, Mimia do Pokuri, a yalo, the Roleva de Portavare. Kudo Kamu Puyapa Dana Kudo Web Dilave Saudi do the Dilo Midabonari Poirica Pipsi body. ကိုကျိုးနည်းနည်းမှမငဲ့ရပါဘူးကိုကျိုးမပါရပါဘူးလူတန်းတယ်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်လူကံပုဂ္ဂိုလ်လူတဲ့ပစ္စည်းဖြည့်စွမ်းပေးခြင်းအပြင်ချမ်းသာအောင်ကူညီတဲ့အလုပ်ပါသူတထူးချမ်းသာအောင်ကူညီတဲ့အလုပ်ပါကိုကျိုးမပါရဘူးတိလလည်းပဲကိုယ့်အကိုထိန်းချုပ်ခြင်းအပြင်အမှားတွေမပြုမိအမှားတွေမပြောမိရအောင်ထိန်းချုပ်ခြင်းအပြင်သူတစ်ပါးကိုမထိခိုက်ရအောင်ကိုယ်စိတ်ဆင်းရဲမဖြစ်အောင်ကာကွယ်တဲ့အလုပ်ပါပဲတနည်းအားဖြင့်လည်းပဲကိုချင်းစာတရားရှိပြီးတော့သူတစ်ပါးမထိခိုက်ရအောင်ကာကွယ်ဆောက်ရှောက်ပေးခြင်းဖြင့်ကာကွယ်ဆောက်ရှောက်ပေးတဲ့အလုပ်ပါပဲအဲ့တော့သူတစ်ပါးအကျိုးကြီးအကျိုးတွေကြီးပါပဲအခုမေတ္တာပွားတယ်ဆိုတာလည်းပဲသူများအကျိုးစီးပွားဖြစ်ဖို့ပဲအဲ့ဒါပဲဒီတော့ဒါနစရှိတဲ့ကုသိုလ်ကောင်းမှုပြုတဲ့အခါကိုယ်ကျိုးမပါရဘူးဆိုတာပေါ့လေထင်ရှားပါတယ်ကိုယ်ကျိုးမပါရဆိုတာအမဂ္ဂဉ္ဇမရှိတဲ့ကိုယ်ကျိုးကိုမမျှော်ရတာပါအမဂ္ဂဉ္ဇရှိတဲ့ကိုယ်ကျိုးကိုတော့မျှော်ကောင်းပါတယ်အဲဒီအမဂ္ဂဉ္ဇရှိတဲ့ကိုယ်ကျိုးဆိုတာကဘဝဆင်းရဲကလွတ်မြောက်ရေးပဲဒါပါပဲအဲ့ဒါတော့မျှော်ကောင်းတယ်အဲ့ဒါတော့မျှော်ရတယ်အဲ့ဒါလိုမျှော်တာကတော့ကိုယ့်အတွက်တကူကောင်းဆန်တဲ့သဘောလည်းမရှိပါဘူးဒီလိုမျှော်တဲ့အတွက်သူတစ်ပါးလည်းပဲဘာမှထိခိုက်စရာမရှိပါဘူးအဲ့ဒါမျိုးတော့မျှော်ကောင်းပါတယ်
The essential meaning of the term parami is noble becoming, or a second meaning would be the work or matter or affair of a noble person. When performing wholesome deeds such as generosity, dana, observing precepts, sila, and especially when developing loving kindness, metta bhavana, it is very important that there is not the least amount of self-interest involved or selfishness involved. When, for instance, performing an act of generosity, then one should do so entirely for the benefits of others. And likewise, when one keeps precepts, one does so in order not to go wrong oneself, not to commit any act of wrongdoing. And this is done, not to lower oneself and not in status and not to harm others. Or one may keep the precepts out of a different motivation, namely in order, knowing that oneself doesn't want to be harmed in any way, so too others don't want to be harmed either, and thus one decides to protect others, and by protecting others, one is protected. One gains protection oneself. So in this, there's no self-interest. Or there's no selfishness involved. Likewise, when radiating loving kindness, we do so for the welfare and happiness of others. And once again, when performing acts of generosity, observing precepts, sila, and developing loving kindness, in such kind of wholesome activities, there should be no selfishness present. And now, however, there should be no selfishness when it comes to activities that do not gain or that do not lead to assurance for oneself. But any kind of activity that leads to assurance, one should have an expectation, or one should hope for such activity. And this is to say, when practicing the Dhamma to gain liberation and to be free from the danger of falling into states of loss. And in this, it is quite okay to show self-interest. And so there's nothing wrong with this. And in pursuing the Dhamma in this sense, there's no harm for others involved.
ဘာကုသိုလ်ပဲပြုပြုနည်းနည်းပဲပြုပြုများများပဲပြုပြုပြုတိုင်းမှာကိုယ်ကျိုးမပြောပါတော့တဲ့ကိုယ်ကျိုးနည်းနည်းမှမငဲ့ရပါဘူးကိုယ်အတွက်အမြတ်ထုတ်ချင်တာမရှိရပါဘူးအဲ့ဒီမရှိဘဲနဲ့အများအတွက်ပဲအများချမ်းသာဖို့အတွက်ပဲကိုယ်အတွက်ကတော့ဘဝဆင်းရဲလုံးမြောက်ရေးပဲဆိုတဲ့မုံမြတ်တဲ့ရည်ရွယ်ချက်လူထားပါတယ်အဲ့ဒီရွယ်ချက်နဲ့အများကနားလည်သွားတာဒီပုဂ္ဂိုလ်ဟာမုံမြတ်သူပဲပရမပဲဆိုတော့အသိဉာဏ်ဖြစ်သွားတယ်သူခေါ်လို့ရှိရင်လည်းပဲပရမမြင့်မြတ်သူဆိုတာပေါ့လေအတုံးဆုံးလေးပေါ်လာတာပါပဲအဲ့လိုမြင့်မြတ်သူရဲ့ဖြစ်ကြောင်းမြင့်မြတ်သူရဲ့အဖြစ်ကိုပါဠိလိုပါရမီလို့ခေါ်တာပါပဲ
Whether or whatever wholesome activity one may perform, whether one performs a little bit of it or one performs it to a great extent, there should not be the least amount of self-interest involved. One should not consider one's own personal selfish interest. And when performing acts of wholesomeness, then one should do so entirely for the benefit of others. So the aim should be a noble aim. And a person who undertakes such kind of noble activity, such kind of noble person, then in the Pali language is called, or such kind of a person is called parami.
သို့သောညံ့တဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်များအစဉ်တန်းနေတဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်များကတော့ဉာဏ်နုတဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်များကတော့ကုသိုလ်ကိုယ်တော်မှကိုယ်ရိုးရှိမှပြုချင်ကြတယ်ဘဝဆင်းရဲကလွတ်မြောက်ရေးတဲ့လောကီခက်ချမ်းသာရရှိရေးနဲ့နာမည်ကြီးဒါလောက်ပဲရှည်တန်းတင်အလေးပေးကြပါတယ်ဒီတော့ပါရမီမြောက်ပြုရတယ်ဆိုတဲ့အလုပ်ဟာအဲ့ဒီလူစားတွေရဲ့အရာမဟုတ်တော့ဘူးအဲ့ဒီလူစားတွေရဲ့အလုပ်မဟုတ်တော့ဘူးဆိုတာရှင်းသွားပါပြီဘယ်လိုပုဂ္ဂိုလ်မျိုးရဲ့အရာလဲလို့ဆိုတော့ဘဝတွေပေါ်မှာညှင်းငွေပြီးတော့အများပေါ်မှာစစ်မှန်တဲ့မေတ္တာစစ်မှန်တဲ့ကရုဏာထားတတ်တဲ့မေတ္တာရှင်ကရုဏာရှင်တို့ရဲ့အလုံးမေတ္တာရှင်ကရုဏာတို့ရဲ့အရာလို့ဒီလိုလည်းပဲအနေဒီပဲဖော်ကြပါတယ်အဲ့ဒါပါရမီပါပဲ
However noble or low a person may be, the person of a low standard or low interest will do acts of wholesomeness for some selfish or with some selfish motivation, such as hoping for a long life, hoping for name and fame, and then also to be free from the cycle of birth and death, samsara. And those who those who do not perform acts of wholesomeness in this way are another kind of, or another group of people. And they are the ones who who perform acts of wholesomeness with genuine loving kindness, metta, and genuine compassion, karuna. And in this way, the term parami becomes clear. So it's those who do wholesome deeds with a very genuine motivation.
Teacher Darakali Pyoya Mesolishi, Suja Basu Sabi Sata Awira Hontu, Abjabija Hontu, Anika Hontu, Suki Atana, Bariharandu. Alung Tatuari Yankinya Basi Sarawadi. That Durba Debe Durba Yankimi Chanda Butebe, Durba Jute Tebe. They go Parami Sita, Kujuma Pau. Till the Metta Pule Dead Metta Bukha Duyaga Kogo, the Kugu don't be unlimited so that you legit, nay, Mamashu. Durba Yankins in the Bova. A Pian Damagau, a to the twin Yaboli Kilita Yandi, Kinsijina. Kilita Yanisra, Yagadoda Moha, Kilita Yanibo. Kilita Yanima, Evu Solushi, Mayo Huri, Pieta Daba, Puma Piomari, Pieta Daba. Yankinya Bazi, Soraha, Kuringa Yani, Kenya Bazi. A shock you are Lucia Navatila, Mieja Bazi, Sora, Turuave. Abatila Mieluji, do to leve, Kuru with his Saint Winjin leve, do to let Duka Mayahu. Palacon. You know, Sisi Kenya Basis, or Sichana Yavasia, that do drepe. Kusia Kenya Basis, or Kuchana Shiva, that do drepe. Do Kana Uni, Soya, let down that. Shibasis, Rally do drepe. Turva adwet, they shin of it, they take out of it. And a part of me, Visura, Metta Burekama, even I shimmer.
To give some clear evidence in this respect, let us take the Pali formula Sabbe Sata Sabbepana Sabbe Sata Avera Hontu, and Sabbe Sata Abhyapaju Paja Hontu Aniga Hontu Suki Atanam Pariha Rantu. Now, the meaning of the first line is Sabisata, may all beings be avera hontu, may all beings be free from enmity and danger. Now this clearly says, this clearly is wishing for others' welfare and happiness, and there's clearly no self-interest involved in it. And so, when radiating loving kindness in this way, then it is done without hoping, without any expectation for something in return. Likewise, the line Abhyapaja hontu, may others be free from physical suffering. Again, this is entirely meant for the benefit of others. And there's no self-interest involved, wishing others to be free from suffering. And then the third line, Aniga Hontu, may the beings be free from from mental suffering. Mental suffering that comes in the form of the enemy of defilements, kilesa vera. Now, this enemy of mental defilements consists or comes in the form of lust, raga, hatred, dosa, and delusion, moha. And so one wishes the other person to be free from this internal enemy. And then being free, or wishing another person to be free from the kilesa vera, is tantamount to wishing, well, may the other person be able to always observe and keep the 5 precepts. May these precepts be well maintained, and thus the physical as well as verbal behavior, may the physical and verbal behavior become cultured and cultivated. And in this way, one wishes another person to be free from mental suffering. This too is for the other person's interest, and not for one's own interest. And then finally, the last line, Sukhi atanam pariharantu, may beings be able to look after themselves happily. And such kind of wishing for the welfare of others, this is then called parami.
လူခဲ့တဲ့ရက်တွေကတွေ့သမျှမြင်သမျှလူတွေတ attva တွေကိုတွေ့တိုင်းပေါ့လေချမ်းသာကြပါစေချမ်းသာကြပါစေဆိုတာကတော့မေတ္တာပို့တာကတော့ဒါကတော့လွယ်လေးပါပဲအခုအဲ့ဒီတဲ့ကျေပြတ်တဲ့900နဲ့တွေ့8တွေ့ပေါ့လေ928ပါးမေတ္တာပို့ဖို့ကိုအတူချုပ်ပြီးတော့ရှင်းပြလိုပါသေးတယ်
It is relatively easy to radiate loving kindness to all beings that one encounters, and wishing them to be well and happy. And it will still be necessary to explain another method of developing loving kindness, namely, which is of 528 kinds.
Sabbi satta avira huntu along tattva dwe yankin ya ba se ဆိုတာပါ ဒီလိုနှလုံးသွင်းတာကမေတ္တာပို့တာကမေတ္တာတစ်ပါးပါအပြပိစ္ဆာဟွန်တုစိတ်ဆင်းရဲကင်းကြပါစေဆိုတာဒါကလည်းမေတ္တာတစ်ပါးပါစိတ်ဆင်းရဲဆိုတာစိတ်ညစ်တာတို့စိတ်ပူတာတို့ဝမ်းနေတာတို့ကြောက်လန့်တာတို့ရှိတဲ့သူတွေနဲ့ကွဲနေရတာတို့ပွဲနေလို့စိုးရင်ပူဆွေးရတာတို့အိမ်အောင်ပြက်လို့ပေါ့လေစိတ်တွေပူဆွေးရတာတို့အလုံးကိုင်းနေအစီမပြေလို့စိတ်ပူဆွေးရတာတို့စီဝဥစ္စာတွေဆုံးရှုံးပျက်စီးလို့စိတ်နှလုံးထိခိုက်နေတာတို့ဒီလိုဟာတွေပါပဲ အဲ့ဒါလို့စိတ်ဆင်းရဲတွေကင်းကြပါစေလို့ဆိုလိုပါတယ်
Sabbe satta avera hontu, may all beings be free from enmity and danger. And this line amounts to one form of loving kindness. Then abhyapaja hontu, may all beings be free from physical suffering. This amounts to another kind of metta. And then may all beings be and then mental suffering comes in the form of worries, of sadness, of fear, and then separation from near and dear ones, which then may result in sorrow or lamentation, and then sorrow over a business that's has broken up, and similar types of mental suffering. So one wishes another person to be free from these forms of mental suffering.
စိတ်ဆင်းရဲကင်းရပါစေဆိုတဲ့စကားလုံးတဲ့ရကတော့စိတ်ချမ်းသာပါစေလို့ဒီလိုဆိုလိုတာပါပဲအနိကဟွန်တို့ဆိုတာကိုယ်ဆင်းရဲကင်းရပါစေဆိုတာကိုယ်ချမ်းသာကြပါစေဟောလေကိုယ်ထဲမှာနာတာကျင်တာကြိုက်တာခဲတာဟောလေတန်ရအနာရဖြစ်တဲ့အခါစိုးစိုးဝါးဝါညှိညူပြီးတော့ခါရတာလေနာဖြတ်မကြယောဂါတွေဖြစ်တဲ့အခါလည်းပဲကိုယ်ဆင်းရဲတွေဖြစ်ရတာတွေပါလေပါအဲ့ဒါကိုယ်ဆင်းရဲကင်းကြပါစေလို့ဒါလည်းပဲမေတ္တာတစ်ပါးပါပဲသူကကိုယ်ဆင်းရဲကင်းကြပါစေဆိုတာကိုယ်ချမ်းသာကြပါစေလို့ဒီလိုဆိုလိုပါတယ်လူတွေမှာကိုယ်ဆင်းရဲလည်းကင်းပြီစိတ်ဆင်းရဲလည်းကင်းပြီဒီဆင်းရဲလည်းမျိုးနှုတ်လိုက်လို့ရှိရင်ကျန်တဲ့ဟာတွေအကုန်လုံးအကောင်းကြီးနေမှာပဲစိတ်ချမ်းသာလို့ကိုယ်ချမ်းသာလို့တကယ်လူရင်းကြပါတယ်တော့လူရဲ့သူတော်ဘာအကျိုးကိုညှို့ကိုပြီးတော့ဗောဒီအာယုပြုပြီးတော့မေတ္တာပို့တဲ့သဘောကဘယ်လိုကောင်းပါလဲဒီကတော့
To be wishing another person to be free from mental suffering is certainly tantamount to wishing the other person to be happy. And then as for the line Sabbe satta niga hontu, may all beings be free from physical suffering. And physical suffering that may come in the form of a disease or wounds, pains, aches, and so on. And this is then yet another form of loving kindness, of metta. And wishing another person to be free from physical suffering is tantamount to wishing the other person well-being, and wishing well-being for the other person. Now, then, if one is free from both mental suffering as well as physical suffering, then what remains? Essentially, essentially, these two are already very good.
Sukhi attanam briharantu chanda swane tetong tetane mimi khana wunyi ko sawet nain ja ba se soda ba le da ga le be metta ta ba ba be tattwa ri ma mimi ro khana wunyi ဆောင်ရွက်နေကြတာဟာအမှန်တကိုဝန်လေးပါတယ်နေ့စဉ်လည်းပဲအစာရည်စားတွေကျွေးရတာအစာသစ်တွေထည့်ရတာနေ့စဉ်လည်းပဲအစာဟောင်းရီဟောင်းတွေထုတ်ရတာတော်တော်မသက်တာတော့အပူအေးမြတ်တောင်နေရတာအနာယူရတာအများကြီးပါပဲဒီခန္ဓာဝင်ကြီးအတွက်နေစာဝနေရေးပေါ့လေဒီမှာစာဝနေကျမ်းမာရေးပြည့်စုံအောင်ပေါ့လေရှားကြံနေရတာဟာအမှန်တကိုဆင်းရဲပါတယ်အဲ့ဒီဆင်းရဲတွေကနေပြီးတော့ကင်းဝေးပြီးတော့ချမ်းချမ်းသာသာနဲ့မိမိခန္ဓာဝင်ကြီးကိုဆောင်ရွက်နိုင်ကြပါစေဆိုတာလည်းပဲဒါလည်းပဲမေတ္တာတစ်ပါးပါပဲအခုပြောခဲ့တာတွေဟာတတ္တဝါအားလုံးကိုအာယုံပြုပြီးတော့မေတ္တာပွားဖို့လေးမျိုးပါပဲ
Sukhiyatanam pariharantu. May all beings be able to look after themselves happily. This too is another form of, or another expression of loving kindness. Now beings have to look after their bodies. And this is a big burden, a big duty, or a big task. And a body has to be provided with food, and then then the bowels have to be moved, and the body needs to be rested. It needs to be cleaned, and so keeping up, looking after this body, caring for the body, is a form of suffering. And so, wishing another person to be able to look after the body, after his or her own body happily, is also an expression of metta. Now, these are the 4 lines of metta, of loving kindness, that is given in a non-specific way, or directed in a non-specific way to all beings.
ထို့အတူပဲစဗ္ဗေပါဏာအာလုံးတရှိတ္တဝါတွေစဗ္ဗေဘုရားအာလုံးထေရှားဖြစ်သူတွေစဗ္ဗေပုဂ္ဂလာအာလုံးပုဂ္ဂိုလ်တွေစဗ္ဗေအတ္တဝပရိယပါဏာအာလုံးခန္ဓာအတ္တဘောယုတ်ခန္ဓာအတ္တဘောခန္ဓာကိုအတ္တဘောရှိကြတဲ့သူတွေဆိုတာပါအဲ့ဒါလို၄မျိုးနဲ့လည်းပဲခုနမေတ္တာပွားပုံကိုအတီးတီးတွဲပြီးတော့မေတ္တာပွားရပါတယ်
In the same way, one can radiate loving kindness to all breathing beings, namely sabbe pana, and then to all beings who have been born, sabbe bhuta, and finally to all those beings who are contained in bodies, who possess a body, materiality and mentality. Sabbe attabhava pariyapana. And we have to radiate loving kindness to all of these beings individually.
Now, mulapo ngagugo satta bana bhuta pogala atta bhava sarada mulapo ngagu soare mulapo ngagu konaga awira hondu boli metta ပွားပုံပေါ့လေ Metta Lili net, Nole Lucia, Nago Line Piolo, Metta Bo Nesea.
So, the categories of beings, starting with Sabbe Satapana, Bhuta, Bugala, and Attabhava Pariyapana, amounts to the 5 basic categories. And to each of these categories of beings, we should radiate loving kindness according to the 4 lines, starting with Avera Hontu, and then Aniga Hontu, Abhyapaja Hontu, and then Abhyapaja Hontu, Aniga Hontu, and Sukhi Atanan Pariharantu. So, multiplying these 5 categories of beings with the 4 lines of metta makes a total of 20 kinds of metta.
Aguပြောခဲ့တဲ့အဲ့ဒါတွေဟာတတ္တဝါအလုံးကိုကြီးရည်ညွှန်းတဲ့အတွက်အနောဒီသောဖရဏမေတ္တာလို့ခေါ်ပါတယ်အပိုင်ချအကန့်အသတ်မရှိတဲ့မေတ္တာလို့ဆိုလိုပါတယ်အလုံးတတ္တဝါဆိုတော့အကုန်လုံးဒီထဲမှာဖိုးရောမရောအရိယာရောပုရုษေရောနတ်တွေရောဗြဟ္မာတွေရောလူတွေရောအပေပုံသားတွေအကုန်လုံးဒီထဲမှာပါသွားပါတယ်ဒီမှာပါရဲ့လို့မကန့်တတ်ဘူးအဲ့ဒါလို့အကန့်အသတ်အပိုင်ချမရှိပဲနဲ့ပို့တဲ့မေတ္တာကိုဒါအနောဒီသောဖရဏာနိခေါ်ပါတယ်ဒီမှာ
The 5 categories of beings mentioned just now are called as anodiso farana, and this means unlimited loving kindness. Why is it mentioned like this? Because it's a form of loving kindness that is being radiated to beings without any limitation, in a non-specific manner. So loving kindness is radiated to all human beings, and then celestial beings, Brahmas, and certain to beings in the states of loss. And this is done without limitation. So therefore, it is known as anodiso farana. အဲ့ဒီတတ္တဝါတွေကိုပဲတနည်းခုနှစ်ပိုင်းခွဲပြီးတော့ပို့တာမျိုးလည်းရှိပါတယ်အဲ့ဒီခုနှစ်ပိုင်းခွဲပြီးတော့ပို့တယ်ဆိုတာကတော့မနဲ့ဖို့တတွဲအရိယာနဲ့ပုရုဇဉ်တတွဲနတ်မြမာတွေကတတွဲလူသားတွေကတတွဲနဲ့အပေပုံသားတွေကတတွဲပေါ့လေဒီမှာအဲ့လိုခုနှစ်ပိုင်းခွဲပြီးတော့ပို့ပါတယ်စဗ္ဗအဋ္ဌိယောအလုံးအမျိုးသမီးတွေလို့ဆိုရမှာပါပဲအလုံးမျိုးသမီးတွေဆိုလို့ရှိရင်လူမျိုးသမီးတာရပါတယ်အမှန်ကတော့မတ္တတ္တဝါတွေမှန်သမျှအကုန်လုံးစဗ္ဗအဋ္ဌိယောတွေမှာပါပါတယ်အမျိုးသမီးတွေရောအခြားတိရစ္ဆာန်မတွေရောအကုန်လုံးဒီထဲမှာပါသွားပါတယ်ဒီမှာစဗ္ဗေပုရိသအလုံးအမျိုးသားတွေဆိုလို့ရှိရင်လည်းဖို့တရဝမှန်သမျှလူသားတွေမဟုတ်အားလုံးတတ္တဝါတွေဖို့တရဝါတွေအကုန်လုံးပါသွားပါတယ်ဒီမှာအဲတော့မနဲ့ဖို့ခွဲလိုက်တဲ့အခါကျတော့ကမ္ဘာပေါ်မှာရှိတဲ့စัจ java လာပေါ်မှာရှိတဲ့တတ္တဝါတွေအကုန်လုံးဒီမှာနှစ်ပိုင်းခွဲလိုက်တဲ့အခါကျတော့ပါသွားတယ်တော့ပြီးတော့သဗ္ဗေအရိယာသဗ္ဗေအနာရိယာအရိယာတွေမှန်သမျှအရိယာကလှုပ်လို့ရှိအာလုံးပုရုဇဉ်တွေကြီးပါပဲအဲတော့တတ္တဝါရှိသမျှတွေကိုအရိယာနဲ့ပုရုဇဉ်နှစ်ပိုင်းခွဲလိုက်တယ်ဒီမှာအဲ
အဲ့ဒါတွေကိုလည်းအဝိဒါဟွန်တုအပြပိစ္ဆာဟွန်တုအနိကာဟွန်တုသုခိအတ္တနာပရိဟာရလို့ဆိုတာတခုတစ်ခုမှာမေတ္တာ၄မျိုး၄မျိုးစီရပါတယ်ဓမ္မသဗ္ဗေဒေဝအာလုနတ်မြမာတွေအဝိဒါဟွန်တုစသည်၄မျိုးပေါ့လေသဗ္ဗေမနုဿာအာလုလူသားတွေဒီတော့တတ္တဝေရှိသမျှကိုဓမ္မနတ်မြမာနဲ့လူသားပုံလိုက်တာပေါ့လေကျန်တာကတော့အပေပုံသားတွေပဲပါတော့တာပဲတိရစ္ဆာန်တွေပါလေအကုန်လုံးပေါ့လေသဗ္ဗေဝိနိပါတိကာအာလုံးပေပုံသားတွေဆိုကုန်မိတတ်တော်တွေမရှိတော့ဘူးဓမ္မဒီတော့သုံးပုဒ်ပေါင်း9ခုပေါ့လေ၃ပိုင်းခွဲပြီးတော့ပို့တယ်၃ပုဒ်ပေါင်း9ပုဒ်အဲ့ဒါရှိပါတယ်အဲ့ဒါတပုဒ်တစ်ပုဒ်မှာဆိုလို့ရှိရင်မေတ္တာ၄ခုစီရတာဟုတ်ဓမ္မအဲ့လိုခွဲလိုက်တဲ့ခါကျတော့9ကို4နဲ့မြှောက်လိုက်တော့ဘယ်လောက်ရမလဲမေတ္တာပါပုဂ္ဂိုလ်9ယောက်ကို4နဲ့မြှောက်လိုက်တဲ့ခါကျတော့28မေတ္တာပေါင်း28ရပါတယ်
Now, these beings that have been mentioned early on can be then further separated into 7 different categories, and one can radiate loving kindness to them. The first such group consists of all females and all males. Then the next group consists of all noble ones and the worldlings, not noble ones. And then the third group consists, and the third group will be explained later on. Now, as for the first group, Sabba itiyo, may all women. Actually, it's not just all human women, but rather all female beings. And this term includes, therefore, all female animals or creatures. So all female beings are included here. And then in the term Sabbe Purisa, this means all male beings. And it is not limited to only the men, but it includes all male beings in this world, in this universe. Then the second group consists of all noble ones and the non-noble ones. So Sabbe Arya are the noble ones, noble beings, holy noble ones, and Sabbe Anarya are those who are not yet noble. And with this are meant the Putujanas, the worldlings. Now each category of beings will be, or to each category of beings, loving kindness will be radiated by using the 4 lines, namely Avera hontu, Abhyapaja hontu, Aniga hontu, Sukhi atanam pariharantu. So may they be free from enmity and danger. May they be free from mental suffering. May they be free from physical suffering and able to look after themselves happily. And then the next group consists of, the last group consists of 3 parts, namely Sabbe Deva. Sabbe Deva, Sabbe Manusa, and Sabbe Vinipadika. Now, by Sabbe Deva are meant all celestial beings. And then as next category we have Sabbe Manusa. These means all human beings. And then finally Sabbe Vinipadika. These are all the beings who have fallen into a state of loss, abhaya. Now these 7 categories cover all possible beings. And as we have seen, they can be grouped into 3 groups. Now when one radiates loving kindness to these 3 groups each, and altogether there's 7 different categories. Then, and we then apply the 4 lines of metta. Then we have a total of 7 categories of beings multiplied by 4 lines of metta, 4 kinds of metta. So it makes a total of how many? 28, of course.
အဲ့ဒီ28ပါးကတော့အမျိုးသမီးမတ္တဝါရီတတ္တအမျိုးသားဖူတဝါရီတတ္တအရိယာတတ္တပုရုရှင်တတ္တနတ်မြမာရီတတ္တလူသားရီတတ္တအပေဘုံသားရီတတ္တပေါ့လေအဲ့ဒါလို့တတ္တတတိတိချကန့်တတ်ပြီးတော့မေတ္တာပို့တဲ့အတွက်ဩဒီသောဖရဏမေတ္တာလို့ခေါ်ပါတယ်အဲ့ဒီဩဒီသောဖရဏမေတ္တာ28ပါးနဲ့ခုနစောစောပိုင်းကပြောခဲ့တဲ့အနောဒီသောဖရဏမေတ္တာ20ပေါင်းလိုက်တဲ့အခါကျတော့မေတ္တာပေါင်း48ရပါတယ်တော့
These 28 certain kinds of loving kindness, or among these, we radiate loving kindness separately to, or loving kindness is radiated separately towards the women or all female beings, then to all males, so this is a separate category, then to all noble ones, again a separate category, and then to all non-noble ones, which again is a separate category, then to all celestial beings as a separate category, then to all human beings as a separate category, and finally to all those who've ended up in a state of loss as a separate category. So, because of this specific nature or because of this nature of specifically radiating loving kindness to a separate group, it is known as odisopharana, so specific pervasion or suffusion of loving kindness. When adding the 28 kinds of odisopharana metta, namely the specific type of metta, to the 20 kinds of non-specific type of loving kindness, as mentioned earlier on, we get a total of 48 types of metta.
မိမိရဲ့ဝိကျင်မှာအရက10မျက်နှာရှိတာကိုအရှိရတောင်ရအနောက်ကမြောက်ကတောင်ရတည်းရဒါအရ10မျက်နှာပြီးတော့မိမိရဲ့အောက်အရမိမိရဲ့အထက်အရဆိုတာအားလုံးအရ10မျက်နှာ10ခုရှိပါတယ်တစ်မျက်နှာမှာခုနမေတ္တာပွားလို့ရှိရင်48ရပါတယ်ဓမ္မဒီတော့48မေတ္တာကိုအရ10မျက်နှာနဲ့မြှောက်လိုက်လို့ရှိရင်မေတ္တာပုံဘယ်လောက်ရမလဲ480 480ရသွားမှာရ10မျက်နှာနဲ့မြှောက်ထားတဲ့480နဲ့ခုနအနောရိသောဖရဏဩရိသောဖရဏမေတ္တာ48နဲ့ပေါင်းလိုက်တော့ဘယ်လောက်ရှိသွားတော့528မေတ္တာဖြစ်သွားပါတယ်အဲ့ဒါ520မေတ္တာဆိုတာအဲ့ဒါပါပဲ
we use as reference points the directions of the compass, and so there are 10 directions known, namely the east, the west, the north and south, and then the nadir, so the downward direction, and then the cenit, the upward direction. And apart from the main directions, there are the intermediate directions, so the south, southeast, northeast, southwest, northwest, so a total of 10 directions. And when radiating loving kindness to the different categories of different categories of groups, as mentioned earlier on, and we said there were 48 categories, then multiplied by 10 directions is a total of 480 types of metta. And so these 480 types of metta, they consist of loving kindness that is directed specifically towards certain beings, and anodi, so the non-specific radiation of loving kindness. And if we add then another 48 types of metta, which is non-directional, then we get a total of 528 kinds of metta. And this is what was initially mentioned.
ဒီတော့928တွေမေတ္တာအရာပေါ့လေဒီခုဘုန်းကြီးတို့သတိပဋ္ဌာန်ဥပဒနာယောဂီတွေပေါ့လေဓမ္မမိသားစုတွေပေါ့လေအားလုံးစုပေါင်းပြီးတော့မေတ္တာဆောင်ပို့ကြည့်ကြစို့လားအဲ့ဒီအတိုင်းပေးပေါ့လေနော်အစအဆုံးအလုံးသတ္တဝါတွေရံပေးကြအဲ့ဒီအစပေါ့ပြောလိုက်အောင်ဒီပဲ
So let us radiate let us radiate loving kindness, the 528 kinds of loving kindness to all beings, and let us do this together, all meditators as well as Dhamma friends who've come together here. So may all beings, please recite. May all breathing beings, may all beings who have been born,
may all
okay, sorry. So may all beings be free from enmity and danger, be free from mental suffering, be free from physical suffering, and be able to look after themselves happily. May all breathing beings be free from enmity and danger, be free from mental suffering, be free from physical suffering, and be able to look after themselves happily. May all beings who have been born be free from enmity and danger, be free from mental suffering, be free from physical suffering, and be able to look after themselves happily. May all individuals be free from enmity and danger, be free from mental suffering, be free from physical suffering, and be able to look after themselves happily. May all those who are contained in bodies be free from enmity and danger, be free from mental suffering, be free from physical suffering, and be able to look after themselves happily. May all female beings be free from enmity and danger, be free from mental suffering, be free from physical suffering, and be able to look after themselves happily. May all male beings be free from enmity and danger. May they be free from mental suffering, free from physical suffering, and may they be able to look after themselves happily. May all noble ones be free from enmity and danger, be free from mental suffering, be free from physical suffering, and be able to look after themselves happily. May all non-noble ones be free from enmity and danger, be free from mental suffering, be free from physical suffering, and look after themselves happily. May all celestial beings be free from enmity and danger, be free from mental suffering, be free from physical suffering, and be able to look after themselves happily. May all human beings be free from enmity and danger, be free from mental suffering, be free from physical suffering, and be able to look after themselves happily. May all beings who have fallen into a state of loss be free from enmity and danger, be free from mental suffering, be free from physical suffering, and be able to look after themselves happily.
Anorizo Paranani Nase Agu Orizo Paranani Nase Shit Lizin a Shibori. The Ayami Semena Mapavene Metta Bon Lizin a Shibo. Agu Ayasemena Ayas Havana Boli Metta Bobo to show the Bioma Soye. Ashi Yaka Alunta Tuari Ramani. Yabikin Yabasi, what in Mandababe, to go into Kujimabe. Everybody listen to shit. Tao Yaka, Nao Yaka, Miao Yaka, Dong Yatia, Ao Yaka, Tayaka, Makolo listen to shit, listen to shit. A colo quabi of Buama, you have a Madariado. Edo Pobu, a Chingamiado, Piolo, Pieto, Nale, you were pure.
Now, there are the 20 kinds of non-specific radiation of loving kindness, anodiso, metta in the Pali language. Then there are the 28 kinds of specific specific radiation or radiating of loving kindness, odiso, metta, and together these make 48. And so far they are non-directional, so not directed in a particular direction. And as for the directional type of loving kindness meditation, well, one radiates loving kindness to all beings in the east, in the west, in the north, in the south, and then in the northeast, southeast, northwest, southwest, northeast, northwest, and to all beings in the lower direction, so in the nadir, and to all beings in the upper direction, in the cenit. And since there's no time to actually radiate loving kindness into all 10 directions, the Sayadaw has to limit himself to just the explanation of it.
Okay, to show you that American people that way body. Hala. Era to meet up with Mabo. Yamaking Yabasi, Sisiaking Yabasi, Kusiaking Yabasi. Mimikana, Tetana, Mimikana was so at Yabasi. Elementa with Ogulashi. The Yeta to my see the Alu Yogi. Yamaking Yabasi, Sadi body. Metabu with the Atinjas.
Okay. Now, let us conclude our Dhamma talk by radiating loving kindness to all American citizens, and then at the end to all meditators in this meditation center. And please repeat after me. May all American citizens be free from enmity and danger, be free from mental suffering, be free from physical suffering, and be able to look after themselves happily. May all meditators in this center be free from enmity and danger, be free from mental suffering, be free from physical suffering, and be able to look after themselves happily.
Okay,
that's it for today.